Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you to all of our supporters for tuning into this briefing. I have back with me Danny Seaman. Danny, it's great to see you.
Glad to be here as usual. Thank you.
Danny is no stranger on these briefings and always has so much to share. And Danny and I were having a conversation the other day, and I said, "Oh, we gotta put this live on the briefing." So, Danny, here's the question. Here in Israel, we're so focused on our own safety and the safety of our children and our family, kids serving in the army, the threats on our borders, rockets coming in, running into bomb shelters. We're focused on the immediate crisis at hand. And in the US, I don't live in the US, but what I'm told is people focus on the immediate issues at hand, the prices of gas, the elections. And when they look at what's going on in this war in Israel, it's another conflict in the Middle East. And I think both Israelis and Americans share something in common in our perspective, that we're missing the bigger picture of putting this war into a much bigger context. What can you share with us about that?
Well, just my observations over the years. Events in the Middle East are not just the Middle East, because you always have the superpowers, the international powers, all involved, engaged here. If in the past we had the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc and the United States and Europe and the Western Bloc, so today you also have Chinese interests and involvement. You have obviously the Russian interests and involvement. You have India and Pakistan, of course. So it's not just a regional thing. It's regional because it's going on here, but it has international broader ramifications. And just you see that just this week, the Iranians and the Russians were in connection. We don't know exactly what. There are people saying that it could be because the Iranians are providing the Russians with these unmanned aircraft, and helping them with that kind of warfare that is developing here. There could be other things involved. There's a lot happening behind the scenes that we don't really know about. And I say that because that's the way it's historically been. If you take the Yom Kippur War, there was Russian threats, there were Soviet threats against the Americans that if Israel does this or that, and they alerted, or they put their nuclear weapons on alert, and the Americans immediately responded. This was happening behind the scenes. So we don't know what kind of things are happening at the moment, but there's no doubt that there are Russian interests, Chinese interests, of course, and certainly American interests and European interests all seem to be colliding. Worlds colliding here, and it's much broader. And at the same time, and here I can say about the government here, I don't say that they're tiptoeing between the different interests and stuff, but they're taking it into consideration, especially what the West and the United States wants. But eventually, as the Prime Minister, and I'm quoting something he said today, we are sensitive to the interests of the United States, but eventually we'll do what is in the interest of the state of Israel. And the majority of the population here in Israel are totally behind that sentiment and that statement.
Thank you, Danny. By the way, I need to clarify, when I kind of characterized everyone in the United States, obviously it's a dangerous statement to make, but I'm referring to the broader population. The core group of people who follow our briefings obviously care deeply about what's happening here in Israel. Danny, you know what, before we continue this conversation, let's pause for a second if we can, because I think there's a couple news items definitely relevant to share with our viewers right now.
Yes. I'm just looking at the news in the background as it's happening. There's no updates on it. There was a terrorist attack today, another terrorist attack. It's about the 7th in the past month. We had, people forget, while we were being attacked by Iranian missiles on that same day, there was an incident, a terrorist attack in Tel Aviv with 7 people killed, among them non-Israelis, people who from Greece, I believe, who lives here in Israel. And there were other attacks during this month in Hadera, a terrorist attack that killed 1 person there, and in Beersheba, where a border police woman was killed. And today, a police officer was killed. We had 57 police officers killed on October 7th last year. when they rushed to the scenes in the south and prevented the onslaught of the Hamas terrorists that day. As that happened, before the army got its act together, the police were there, and we lost 57 police officers. There was a terrorist attack, I believe in August, in which 3 police officers were killed. One of them was the father of a police officer, a woman who was killed on October 7th. Her father was killed in this terrorist attack. And then there's a police officer that was killed today. So that's what was happening here in Israel. This was done, again, inside of Israel on the route between Haifa and Tel Aviv on Route 4. A Gazan who left Gaza somehow got into Judea and Samaria, and from there was somehow smuggled into Israel. It's also something that has to be addressed. The attacks that were conducted here were several from Hebron, suicide attackers and terrorists from the Hebron area. Others, Israeli Arabs. There was also an ISIS group of Israeli Arabs who joined ISIS and wanted to pull off, and this was released this week, a very severe terrorist attack to try to topple the towers in Tel Aviv. So we have all this while we're engaged with Gaza and with Lebanon at the moment. You have these things happening. I think in every one of the incidents, the terrorists were eventually taken out by armed Israeli citizens. And this follows the October 7th of last year, when the government decided to expand the permits for civilians to handle personal weapons. So that was very important here, because as that terrorist was trying to move on was shooting people on the road, armed Israeli civilians jumped on him and were able to eliminate him as a further threat. The other thing that we have here is with the ongoing battle right now in Lebanon, what is being revealed this week were 2 important things. One, we do know that in the past months, very often people are asking, why is the government of Israel not doing anything to help the citizens in the north of Israel? Well, we know now that during these past months, Israel was operating in South Lebanon, taking out the threat that we knew was imminent by Hezbollah and able to limit that to the point. Now they're uncovering a lot of the terrorist tunnels that they were planning. And I can say something that I've related to in other briefings that I've given recently. The more we discover of what was being planned for an assault, an Iranian-backed assault on several fronts against the state of Israel, the more it appears now that, as horrible as October 7th was last year, we may have been very lucky. And it's painful to say that, because we paid a very terrible price. But October 7th seems to be, it exposed us to a lot of the intentions. Had they been able to have a unified attack on that day coming from the north, from Judea and Samaria, and not with 6,000 and plus terrorists that came out of Gaza, but 30-some thousand, and we're talking about huge numbers. We're planning, the Hezbollah, we're planning to attack Israel from the north, and the terrain there is much more difficult and hard to protect than it is in the south of Israel. Apparently, we were very fortunate, if we want to call it, that just the attack happened in Gaza, which allowed us time. And then people have to understand why we're continuing and why we're doing these battles right now is because this was a threat that they promised, and they continue to promise us, and therefore it has to be eliminated now by Israel.
100%. Okay, Danny, thank you for that update on what's happening right now in the war. So let's go back to our first conversation, if we can. We view this as a war between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah. Some people say, no, it's really a war between Israel and Iran. Iran is really the puppet master. But I think you view it differently. You say, no, it's much bigger. It's a war between the East and the West. What exactly does that mean?
Well, Iran obviously has its sights set on Israel, and they promise to annihilate the state of Israel. They even have a clock in the center of Tehran that has the date, and it's clicking back. It has a date going back to or forward towards 2040, at which time they have committed themselves to destroying the state of Israel. And this is not just an incident that happened recently. This has been planned by them and been going on now for over a decade. We know that, actually, the Iranians want to do this for a long time, but they were building this whole constellation of these proxies against Israel with the Hezbollah, with Hamas, with the Houthis, with the Iraqis, with elements in Syria, planning to assault Israel in all these directions and keep us in a war of attrition, and banking a lot on what they saw in the, and I say this, in the 20 years since in the 19 years since we left Gaza Strip, there were 17 rounds of conflict between Israel and Gaza and the Hamas, 17 rounds that lasted somewhere between a week, 10 days to a month was the longest. Some of them included also conflicts with Hezbollah in Lebanon. And at every time they knew that Israel would restrain itself, every time the world, and I knew this working in government, we were always told there's a sand clock running right now. We have a few days that they'll let us do things, and then within 4 or 5 days, a week at the most, international pressure will stop mounting and to a limit and tie Israel's hands that we can't continue. At the same time, the public here in Israel, and I know this from the South, from my family, and from any Israeli, every time we were under attack, under missile attacks, sirens going off, being in shelters, the civilians in Israel said to the government, finish it, finish it. We don't care, we don't mind being in the shelters, but we need to put an end to this disruption of our lives. And every time, under certain conditions or criteria, things, we stopped. So for the Iranians, it was quite clear that building up to this, they knew, or they at least expected, that Israel would have its hands tied behind its back, and they could annihilate us through, dragging us through a consistent war of attrition and weakening Israel, and then strike with the biggest strike. Now, at the same time, Iranians were developing their relationships, their international relationships. Same thing with Russia and with China were involved in many different ways. A lot of this has to do with the elements of oil and gas and all these things. They saw that the relationship developing now between Israel and the Sunni countries, and the Sunni themselves see the Iranians as a threat to them. And they were trying to create this alternative route of source of energy sources to Europe through Israel, and with a connection of not only the Abrahamic Accords, and this also includes India and other countries. Netanyahu was operating on this field for many years, developing relationships, understanding that this is much greater than just Israel and the Arab world. So you have this whole constellation going on. Now, with Russia, you had that move to extremism for whatever the reasons or excuses. Some will say that they used, feeling that they were being pressured by the West, by NATO, by the United States, with the attempt to expand its hold on countries in Eastern Europe. True or not, I'm not getting into that at the moment. I'm saying that's part of the thinking on their part. So they naturally sided with Iran. And also you see that Iran has what to offer them. Now, it's mutual. They pay Iran for oil, etc., helping the Iranians, at least at the time that they were being boycotted by the United States and by European countries. These restrictions on Iran were lifted, unfortunately, and the United States sent billions of dollars to the Iranians, which did not go to benefit the Iranian people. It went to strengthen the Houthis, the Hezbollah, and Hamas. And when you see what the Houthis, for example, what they're doing with international transportation, once there were pirates, once the whole Western world, the civilized world, were opposed to pirating in the seas, and here they're turning a blind eye, or at least limiting their response. And I remind you that an American naval ship was captured by Iranians, not only Houthis, by Iranians. This also goes to the Straits of Tiran and the Straits of the area near between Iran and Saudi Arabia of Hormuz, and the Americans didn't do a lot. This in the past, I believe it happened. The Marine song, from the shores of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, the Marine song. This happened because of pirates events, Islamic pirates back in the 18-something, where they took over American ships and they sent the Marines to release the American ships at that time. So that's nothing new, as we see. It just shifts to different types of countries, and the names change. So this very much is an international conflict going on different levels. Right now, thank you for Robert for giving the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. That is the exact quote. And so this is what Israel is dealing with. Right now, the onus of this whole effort is on the shoulders of the state of Israel, but we're fighting a battle that the entire Western world will be engaged in one way or another if we don't take out and neutralize this Iranian threat at the moment. That's what's happening now.
Danny, we like the Mets Cup.
Our LA fans are going to drop out now.
So, as you mentioned, Iran has economic dealings with Russia and China, as does Israel. China has a lot, invested here in Israel. Do you think that there is a concern within Israel that whatever happens with Iran could have implications for Israel's relationship with China or Russia, or China and Russia supporting an Iranian defense against Israel in the US?
If relationships were all about, I think the only two countries that honestly base their relationship on shared values and a world view is the United States and Israel, to a degree. Even with the United States and Israel, it's limited. When it comes down to it, countries will do what is in their own self-interest. Too many Israelis believe, we have to have the Europeans like us and the world has to love us. And I think that's past. After October 7th last year and what we've engaged in the past year, most Israelis will tell you right now, we do not care anymore. And right now, our efforts are focused on our own survival. And there will be countries that may not like what we're doing. Well, tough, because it's not their children who are being burnt, and not their women who are being raped, and not their families who are being destroyed. It's ours. And this cannot happen again in the state of Israel. And we can't say that often enough. And my whole career was based on doing public diplomacy for Israel. I say today, I don't think I don't even care anymore. They like us, they don't like us, they understand, they don't understand. No, they have to understand one simple thing. And that simple thing is the state of Israel. When we said never again is what we're doing now. That the Jewish people can defend themselves. Some people, historically, is the same thing. Some people always had a problem when Jews were defending themselves. Well, tough luck for them. We are going to do what is necessary for us. Now, we're going to pay attention and respect those of the countries who are our allies. But at the end of it, when it comes down to it, we'll do what is in our own interest. Now, we don't have to waste time on saying and arguing, we're going to do this, what's going to happen the day after, where are we going to go now, what are we going to attack in Iran? Too much talk going on. Too much talk going on. We'll do what we need to do. Regarding Iran, I can say this. This has been in the sights of Israel for nearly 15, 20 years. We have to eliminate that threat. We knew this for a long time. The time for it is now. We always knew it was going to be in the future. This is the future we were planning for. There'll be no better time for Israel to do this. So we're not going to wait, and we're not going to put it on pause, and we're not going to, I can say that with total confidence. And don't worry right now, is it today, is it tomorrow? Because the war has begun already. And it's not going to end with Israel attacking certain places on Iran. It could, by the way, I don't know what we're planning to do, but most likely it's going to be after we do whatever is necessary with Iran, it will continue. It's going to be a long war, just like with Gaza, just like with Lebanon. It's going to be long and extended. And the same thing may happen with Iran. But at the end of it, what this tension of the state of Israel, and I can say this with absolute confidence, understanding where Netanyahu is going at the moment, it is to put an end to the Iranian threat to the state of Israel. So when you ask me about the others, China and Russia, yes, again, they have a certain relationship with the Iranians, but countries tend not to engage and fight with those who they see are strong and determined. So they may have, but they'll back off, because getting in a war that they themselves don't want to get into is not worth it because of Iran. The same thing with the Chinese. And look, despite the fact that we've had relations with them for the past 20-some, 30 years, still they voted against us in the UN. They criticize us. They accuse us of all different things. So fine, we'll do just like they do what is in their interest. I think it's finally come to a point where Israel is doing what is in its interest. And I'll say more than this. It's not only the interest of the government, it's the interest and what the people of the state of Israel are demanding of the government. And don't be mistaken by what you hear on the New York Times, on CNN, on our Haaretz newspaper, or the left-wing media here in Israel. They're not representing the interests of the people of Israel. Those media outlets are representing what the State Department in the United States thinks is the best interests of the United States. They're wrong about the United States. They're certainly wrong about Israel.
Danny, Seaman, thank you for sharing all of that. I want to thank all of our viewers and supporters who are sending us so many questions right now. And we don't have time for them, but we're going to make sure to prioritize these issues for upcoming briefings. I want to remind everyone that the Jewish holiday of Sukkot is fast approaching, and therefore we're going to be on a bit of a hiatus of these briefings. So if you are receiving our emails from IDSF, then you will be able to find out when our next briefing is after the Sukkot holiday. If you're not on these emails, you should join our email list. It's a great way to stay in touch and see all of the work that we are doing and our schedules. Danny, thank you so much for joining me today.
To everybody, and Chag Sameach, and enjoy the holidays.
Absolutely. Wishing everyone a beautiful holiday for those who celebrate the Chag Sameach. And we will see you after Sukkot. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.